Good afternoon and welcome to A Beer with the Old Growler. I'm the Old Growler, Pete LaFrance. Glad to have you with me this afternoon. It is 5 o'clock in the afternoon of Thursday, the 21st of May, 2020. And this is the 44th edition of A Beer with the Old Growler on day 66 of our shelter in place here in Brooklyn. And that is why I'm so glad to have you folks here having a beer with me today. There are no pubs, bars, taverns, etc. open right now, and so it's a little bit disconcerting for a journalist like myself that's been covering the malt beverage, the hospitality industry for about 35, 40 years, and to have that kind of things come to such a screeching halt, as well as, of course, I have always had a tendency to enjoy imbibing in the grain and grape. So anyways, if you need to know any more information about why the Old Growler has taken over this channel, well, go to the front page of this channel and click on the trailer and find out. Okay, let's see. I do try and work from a little bit of an organization method here before we open our beers. Let me explain. Well, actually, you know something? It is 5 o'clock. Oh! And I have put in a pretty good day, so it's time to. Now, I didn't get a chance to get to the Henry Street Ale House to pick up a fresh growler. However, I remembered, I believe I remembered yesterday to be particularly vigorous when securing the top to this growler. So there might be some Coney Island lager left in here. We'll find out, because I got to wet my. Well, it does. It's a good sound there. It's a good sound. Okay, let's get this thing up here. Bring the glass over. Now we're gonna learn to tilt the glass, Peter. When you should know that. Haven't known that for ages and ages, but sometimes you don't. And for this case, you want to give it a vigorous pour, see what happens, and by golly, let's look at that. Oh, we've got a nice piece of, we got a nice head there. That's nice. Well, look at that. That's enough to make a beer geek happy. It certainly does making me happy, and that's for sure. Okay. It is, come on, Peter. Check this out. Would you? That's a little bit better. It is 5 o'clock. And I've got some folks visiting. I see 4 of you here. It's good to see you. And thanks for the thumbs up. It looks like there's a couple of thumbs up there. I always appreciate that. But before we go any further, let's have a salute to Thursday, the 66th day in and the 44th Old Growler. Oh, that won't kill you. It was good yesterday. It's still carbonated. Must be doing something right. Oh, that is nice. Well, it is another super fine day here in Paradise, Brooklyn, USA. And happy to be here. Now that I've had my sip, I'm going to explain a little bit more how things work here. The Old Growler used to hang out at the Henry Street Ale House, where he would take a look. On Thursdays, he'd get together with the bar manager there and the bartender Jerry Scott, Jim Bennis, and there was always 2 or 3 other people that would be there to do a beer tasting, and we called it meeting expectations. Quite simply, a matter of taking a look at a beer can or a beer bottle and reading off the ingredients and reading off any of the information that the brewer feels it was important for me to know. And also check out the graphics. I mean, what is the brewer trying to, or their marketing people trying to tell me? What is this beer going to be like? And then we would say, well, all right, According to the information on the can, it should be this. And if that's what we were expecting. So Jerry would pour out the samples, and we'd try it out and see if it met expectations. And if it did meet expectations, it got a thumbs up. And if it didn't meet expectations, it got a thumbs down. And a little bit. And what I've decided is that if it meets expectations, it gets a 2. If it exceeds expectations, it gets a 1. And if it, if it doesn't meet expectations, it gets a 3. And so there we go. That's what we're going to be doing for the tastings. And and after the tasting, well, if you still want to hang around, the Old Growler's got some more stories to tell, mainly about what it was like to be a, I guess you could say, a professional barfly, having done a good 5 years of freelance work, and then 3 more years working behind the desk, and then some more years writing books, beer basics, and cooking and eating with beer. It's been quite a history, and each place that I've been, each dinner that I've had, each person that I've met, I would say that I've been able to learn just a little bit. And that little bit that I've learned, I've always been grateful for. And so that's pretty much what I'm going to do, is I'm going to go over and remember some of the restaurants, some of the taverns, some of the people I've met, and tell you why I met them, and what the circumstances were, and how I remember it, and what the Old Growler got out of it. Anyways. That's pretty much the format. And for those of you who are who are watching the calendar, again, I mentioned this is the 44th. Tomorrow is going to be the 45th Old Growler. And so that means that on the 29th of May, that is going to be the 50th Old Growler. And I think that probably will be one of the last all live Old Growlers. After that, we're going to split it up into 2 playlists and post them on different days of the week. Of course, we will still go live. We will go, I was going to say taping, but we will go recording certainly 1 day a week. Still go recording 1 day a week, and we'll have some good times doing that. But we'll, after the 50th presentation, we're going to step back as far as the all live presentation, the daily presentation, and stretch things out a little bit. As things are opening up, it also means I could get to go out and see some things, that go and visit some places and see some people. So that is what we are going to do. Okay, let me just have another sip. Okay. As I mentioned earlier, that one of the things we do here is, of course, the beer tasting. I explained the routine, and I said that so sometimes we get a can of beer, and sometimes we get a bottle of beer, and sometimes, if we're lucky, a spirit will drop in, and once in a while it does happen that way. In fact, there's going to be a link down below in the description box about our friend today who has come to visit. And yes, it is a spirit. A spirit, yes, it is. It is a gin. We have a gin here today, and as I say, we tasted this before over at the Henry Street Ale House, and as you can see, it's a very opaque bottle. You can't see through it, and I'm assuming that there is enough left in here to taste, because as I remember right, there were probably 4 or 5 tourists. There was Jim, me, and Jerry, and we tasted it straight, and then we tasted it on the rocks, and then we tasted it with a mixer, and as well as the guests. So I'm afraid we probably went through this quite a. It was this we did a damn. In any event, the link will be down below in the description box, and what we can do is compare what I'm going to experience today, what we are going to experience today, and compare it to what the impression was at the tasting at the ale house. So let's begin. As you can see, it's a very kind of unusual bottle for a gin, being that gins are clear, and most gin bottles would want to show you what's in there. So it must be an appreciation of going back in time. And as you can see, the label there is an old-time label, and the back label is also kind of rustic-looking, old Western style. And it says right at the top there's 750 milliliters. This is Madame Pattirini small batch gin, and this is batch 32, bottle 218. 88 proof, 44% alcohol by volume, and it has a picture of Madame Pattirini right there. That's her. Okay, and then on the back. Okay. First of all, we're going to note here that it is distilled and bottled by Ogden's own Distillery, Limited Liability Corporation in Ogden, Utah. So we have a gin coming out of a very dry Mormon country. And speaking of Mormons, the distiller apparently has a sense of humor. Here's the backstory, and quite literally the backstory. Madame Pattirini, a.k.a. Brigham Morris Young, was the 35th child of Brigham Young. In 1885, after returning from a second church mission in Hawaii, B. Morris Young performed and sang all over Utah as a woman. Madame Pattirini's falsetto was so convincing, many in the audience did not realize she was a man. Madame Pattirini gin celebrates that Utah is a little wilder than many people think. And it says it has juniper, bergamot, coriander, cardamom, Nigerian ginger, and Sicilian limes. That is what has been infused in this. Distilled from grain. So that's what we got. So, boy, oh boy. The story alone is fun. The ingredients we've got, it's not going to be a traditional gin. So I'm looking for something a little bit different than just the traditional juniper berry. All right, well, let's crack this open, back open, and see what we've got. Now today I'm using a snifter, because that's what I've got. And for folks who are saying, well, geez, how can you have a gin tasting on a beer channel? Well, we are friends in fermentation, and I've told this story many times before, and I'll put a link down in the bottom for you to get the back story on it. But for a spirit to exist, something had to have fermented. And most of the time, with whiskeys, it's beer. With gin and vodka, it can be potatoes, it can be anything, but something has to ferment. So essentially, we're all friends in fermentation. Okay, here we go. Not too much there, Peter. We'll save a little bit. All right. Well, by George, it's clear. There is some juniper berry in there in the aroma. Let's swirl this around. Let it aerate it out a little bit. Wow, there is an interest. When I say interesting, it's not an offensive aroma. It's a very enticing aroma. So and look and take a look at the at the legs. The amount of, maybe you can see the rim, the ring that is just starting to see there. That ring that's just starting to form. See that the legs on this boy. Okay, this is going to have some body. Okie dokie. Let's see. Wow. An orange. There's orange in there. And oh, what a bunch of pleasant flavors. But I'm getting particularly orange. Not too much juniper. There's a very little juniper in there. No, I mean, no. Whoa, that's a happy little thing. And it's got a full feel to the mouth. It really does. It's a viscous. Yeah, that is yummy. Well, trying to imagine a gin coming out of Utah, first off, is pretty amazing. And from the story that the backstory on here, it is most amusing. And it does say that there's juniper in here, bergamot, the coriander, and the cardamom. Now you see, there we go. That's what I'm getting. The Nigeria and the lemon, the ginger. I'm not getting too much out of it. There is a sharp part of ginger on the upper palate later on, but yeah, the cardamom and coriander, those are there. And as I said, the lemon, it must be that the citric of the lemon and the coriander make it kind of give it an orange type of flavor, an overall orange flavor. But it's we did have a lot of fun mixing this, and when it's chilled, it's even more fun. So does Madame Pattirini small batch gin? How does it fit? Is it a 1, a 2, or a 3? Well, it's not a 3, and it's certainly it passes as a 2, but I'm gonna give it a 1. So Madame Pattirini's small batch gin from Ogden's Own. Let's get it up here so you can get a good shot from Ogden's Own. That certainly exceeds expectations. Oh boy. That's you got to be careful. I'm not going to have too much more of that. Leave you and me, Bob. Okay, well, geez. Okay. We get to part 2 now. And this is where I get to get back to some beer, because as I say, I don't want to Madame Pattirini's visit. I don't want to become over-influenced. Now I get to my life as a professional barfly. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, to put a time limit on it, to say I've been covering the industry for starting out with the small breweries, the microbreweries, the brew pubs, then working at a magazine. First of all, it was freelance, and then working for a magazine for 3 years. And in that, I was covering the spirits and wine industry as well. And later on, after the 2 books, in fact, that's going to be one of the topics of today. You went on book tours, and you did book signings and events, and particularly beer dinners, and that was a lot of fun. And I would always, after each beer dinner, I would collect, I would take a menu, and I would have everyone involved sign it, because I wanted to frame it and put it up on what what is known as the I Love Me wall. Now, an I Love Me wall is a little, it's well known in the military, and I went to a military university, and so a lot of my buddies are officers after they graduated. And the I Love Me wall is put together by every officer, and you can always tell how long they've been in and how many assignments they've had, because what you do is you take the insignia of the unit that you were with, and you'd make a brass inlay, or you do a kind of some type of plaque with the insignia on it, with the date from when you started out until when you left, and the rank that you were, etc. And so if you went to many assignments and you stayed in long enough, you were in for 20 years or so, you could have a really impressive I Love Me wall. And that was what it was called, was the I Love Me wall. So I started collecting the menus. And so at one time in the dining area that we have here in the apartment, there were approximately, I believe, let's see, went 6, maybe 8, 10 across, 10, 20, 30, at least 30 menus, signed menus of beer dinners and other events that had to do with beer dinners up there. So I had quite an impressive I Love Me wall. And recently, was going through, being that when you're in a situation like we're in, you start looking for things to do. Well, I started looking through the closets, and I found it has to be at least 30, maybe more, framed, these framed menus from the I Love Me wall. And so for those of you who hang around long enough, you're going to be able to see some of those menus. In fact, I've got 2 of them right here. And this had to do with a book tour that I went on after Cooking and Eating with Beer was published. And let me just, I can reach up there and I should really learn to put my props together beforehand, but this was Cooking and Eating with Beer, came out in 1997. And so it took a while to promote it, but I did get some good promotions. And I got kind of a reputation, particularly in the Boston area, 2000, 2001, doing what was called the Boston Dine Around. And that would be where a restaurant would team up with you, and you would go in with your book, and you would talk to the chef, and the chef would use 1 or 2 of the recipes in a pre-fee menu. And you would be there to talk in between the courses, to do an introduction, to talk between courses, and to do a finish up with a question and answer, and then a book signing and sale. It was great for the restaurant. It was in the slush season, I called it, up there in Boston. And in fact, I've got the menu here is from January 22nd, 2002. And this one was an interesting one because I was there to sign books. Yes, I could. I had my book there, and people were interested in it. And it was a nice presentation at the start. And the reservation menu mentioned it, and that was nice. Except that when it came time to do the menu, to put the menu together, it was the chef. She was the one that came up with it, and the promoter, and in this case was Labatt USA, featuring Stella Artois, Hoegaarden, and some other specially selected imported beers that were part of their collection. So it was pretty much the idea that she put together the menu, they handed me the beers, and they said this is what the beers are going to taste like, and or this is what the beers are going to be for pairing up with the menu items. So it was more or less talking points on this one. However, it was a lot of fun to work with Phyllis Kaplowitz, who was the exec chef there, and she was really excited about beer. And Jacob Worth's is a historic landmark in Boston, so it was a lot of fun to be in that German restaurant and put together beer dinners. And we had to do, not had to, but we did two dinners. And it was one of them I seem to remember, in fact, I do remember, were journalists. I believe there was 3 tables of 10, so 30 people, maybe more, that were attending, plus the promotional people. So that was the dinner that we had, and it started out with a sausage sampler, which is pretty simple. Grilled bratwurst topped with red beer sauce, served with samplings of German potato salad and sauerkraut. Cherry beer glazed beef short ribs, served over cheddar white polenta with wild mushroom ragu. A lambic poached pear salad, field greens tossed in a vanilla shallot vinaigrette with lambic poached Bartlett pear, lavender candied hazelnuts, and Stilton cheese. A tempura ale battered fried New England cod, served with cinnamon scented noodles, wilted baby spinach, and ginger soy sauce. Now that it does mention here that it does come from a recipe courtesy of Peter LaFrance, Cooking and Eating with Beer. So one of the I do stand corrected. When I looked at the presentation menu, I did not notice that it was on there. So much for doing homework. Then also a beer brined grilled pork chop filet mignon served with cider glaze, maple sweet potato puree, pancetta braised red cabbage, and beer battered fried apple crisp. And the finishing touch was a chocolate Guinness stout mousse served in dark chocolate beer stein with a almondine cherry port sauce. I remember that dessert, particularly the chocolate beer stein. That was a lot of fun. But the beers that went with it, again, this is traditional German. The sausages we had, the Stella Artois, and a Dos Equis Amber. And that was the interesting thing about this particular menu, was that they had 2 beers for each one of the dishes. And I thought that was, I'm sure it had to do with their marketing, but it made sense because it gave you a selection of one of the 2. And particularly in presenting it to the press, being that these were mostly journalists or people involved in the food service industry, I believe. It was a very informative. I thought it was very informative to me to be there, and that was what I really got out of it, was that it was an ability to have the double selection of the beers and not to shy away from major names of beers. I think the chef was lucky, and I was lucky enough to be able to work with that, and so kind of an adapt over just overcome. But I remember in particular with this dinner, it was enjoyable to me because it wasn't. I didn't have to explain a lot. I didn't have to explain a lot about the brewing process. These people already, most of them knew about it. And as far as the beer pairings, some of the people who were involved were also food critics. And so it was, I wouldn't say a test of wills, but a fine exchange back and forth. And it was a lot of fun. And I guess the one thing that I do remember specifically at the end was that Julie Dennehy, who was the woman who ran the presentation, at the end, it took about an hour. It took about 2 hours to do the entire event, and she asked me at the end. She said, "Peter, I'd love to see your notes." And I said, "Well, I'd love to show them to you, but I don't have them. I just kind of went along, and she was impressed, and I was very pleased as to how that dinner worked out. But as I said, you take away something from every single one. Now this beer dinner that I'm going to talk about, and we're at 5:30, so I'm running a little over time, but I'm going to talk about it anyway because I want to. Okay, and I need a little bit more. Do I need a little bit more beer? Yes, I do. That's a good one, but I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Since I've got these sitting here, I'm going to open up one of these hooties. I must admit, in hearing the name of this, this is a hootie. It is an ale. Yes, it is an ale put out by 6 Point. And every time I hear Hootie, I hear Hootie and the Blowfish. And this is a hazy IPA, as you can actually see. Wow, 3 thumbs ups. Thank you, folks. Whoa. Oh, that's good. Okay. Back to the last story, and I swear it won't take more than 15, 20 minutes. No, it'll take less than that. One of the fun things about having written Cooking and Eating with Beer was that it did catch the attention of the food world rather than, as well as the beer world. And the folks at John Wiley managed to finagle something that I was really impressed with, and it was a couple years after the book was published, and they were still at it. So their tenacity was really admirable, because in 1999, on Thursday, July 15th, myself and some of the kids, the folks that were involved with Cooking and Eating with Beer that are local, Sam Barbieri and Jim Takas, a guy who's unfortunately passed away, and Ralph Yedinak, still with us, from the Waterfront Ale House in Brooklyn, Don Sullivan from the Southampton Public House, Dave Page from Drover's Tap Room and Home, 2 restaurants in Manhattan, and he also runs, I believe, a winery out in Long Island now. And Peter LaFrance, who was the author of Cooking and Eating with Beer. And we were all invited to attend, to put together, as I say, this is on Thursday, July 15th, to appear at the James Beard House in New York City. The James Beard Society asked me to do a dinner, and that to me was the pat on the back. That said, Peter, okay, your book is being accepted. And the fact that all of the chefs were as enthusiastic as they were was also something that was really a heck of a lot of fun. And knowing that all of these chefs were showing off what they particularly were excited about in putting the menu together. It all came out of the Cooking and Eating with Beer book, and to me this was the epitome of really the pat on the back. And so journalists and writers, that's the one thing that we do really, I would say, yes, we do. We don't get immediate feedback on what we do, because if you when it was print, you would publish it probably, if it was a magazine, it would be 6 months, or if it was weekly, 6 weeks after you had written it, and you were already working on at least 2 more projects. So that and you didn't get paid until 2 months after that. So when someone would write in to say that they liked your particular article, if the editor managed to put it into the letters to the editor, it would be, again, 7 months later. And so as far as getting any kind of pat on the back, it was few and far between, and it was mostly in person. But the well, let's go through the menu. The most that I enjoyed about this dinner was the fact that I didn't really have to do too much talking. The chefs were there. They were introduced. Each was introduced, and each was introduced with the course that they served, and they were able to explain it, and I was able to explain about the beers that were selected to go with it. So it was a wonderful coordination with people that I had known and appreciated. So it was one of my favorite beer dinners of all time. And to start out with, David Page, barbecued wild mushrooms, smoked trout Johnny cakes, his pepperoni and salmon, he made it himself, assorted fancy potato chips, and cornmeal fried oysters. So it was like quite a selection of finger food that he put together, and it went together with a Brooklyn Pilsner and a Southampton IPA. And remember, particularly out on the patio at the James Beard House, with people talking about it, and I was able to meet my editor's husband for the first time, and he had of course heard about the book and everything, and about my writing and covering the beer industry. And his first remark was that he couldn't understand how thin I was. Well, I wasn't thin, but why I wasn't more corpulent for writing about beer. But that was a lot of fun. The second course, the second bit was Dave Sullivan from out in the Southampton Public House, and that was the Shinnecock mussels in a Belgian saison ale, served with their Southampton Belgian saison ale from the Southampton Public House. And at that time, Phil Markowski, the brewer up at Two Roads right now, was out there doing some fantastic French style beers, and it was just a farmhouse style, and that was just a marvelous piece of work. And of course, the Shinnecock mussels, they had just been pulled out of the water earlier that day, and that was an amazing piece of work. From the Waterfront Ale House, they were known for. Sam had a smoker in the back there, and he would smoke anything. And I smoked bologna sandwiches were some of the best I've ever had. But anyways, for this one, he did in a smoked pastrami. Oh boy. A waterfront BLT salad with double smoked pastrami spiced bacon and Eckerton Farms organic heirloom tomatoes. And that was paired with an Omegang Belgian ale and a Hennepin ale. And those were both from Omegang. And one was a little bit redder and sweeter. But that was there is a story about about his smoked pastrami and a pastrami sandwich that someday I'll tell you guys. That's a good one. Okay. And also an applewood smoked pork loin with summer fruit chutney, corn fritters, and jalapeno sauce. And that one, I'm pretty sure, came out of Jim Takis, because he was a chef that had a real sense of flavors and textures. He was a lot of fun too. When he was at the Henry Street Ale House, Waterfront Ale House, it was fun to go in with my wife Virginia to sit in a booth instead of at the bar and say, well, to the waiter, this is the amount of money. Tell chef just feed me, and he would always come up with some great dishes. And finally, David Page, chocolate glazed raised donut ice cream sandwich with summer berries, with a Brooklyn chocolate stout and a Wisconsin Belgian red ale. And I remember the red ale in particular going well with the chocolate. That was just a really fantastic flavor combination. But that was and it was a hot night. I remember that in particular. And everyone got the tour of the James Beard House. And if you are ever able to go there for a dinner, do give it a shot, because it is a lot of fun. I've been there three times to be able to enjoy other people's presentations, and that's even more fun, because then the spotlight is not on you. But it was amazing. First of all, because the chefs had to bring their own their own produce and whatever they were cooking, and as well as some of their own equipment. The kitchen there is relatively limited, and the fact that they were all able to work together, I was that still amazes me at this time, and I do not know how I had the cojones to be able to ask that many chefs into one kitchen. If I had a video recorder, I would have certainly recorded that. But it worked out in the end, particularly in the end, because out and again in the garden in the patio, after everything was over, there had to be the emptying of the kegs, and all of the chefs and the staff got together and had a bunch of good laughs out there, emptying the kegs, and that was a lot of fun. The most difficult thing about it, I had to carry a good amount of books home. I believe it was a box full, so it was about 30 books, and so it was a little heavy. So, oh, hey, Walmart's, fantastic, good to see you here, my friend. I hope you're feeling well. Oh, that's a good beer. The Hazy IPA saves the day. Well, I've gone a little over time, and I hope you all enjoyed it. It's been a real thrill for me. I'm looking forward to tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to celebrate, and I don't know quite what to celebrate with, but I was going to get some beer from Circa, which was a small brewery, a little bit away, and they did have on their website that they were delivering, or that they did have the ability to produce, and unfortunately, as we all know, you can't believe what you see on the web, and so that didn't work out. But I'm going to give it a good try tomorrow. We might, if I do get too excited. Oh, there's some of the beers that Jamie Gerardo sent me, and I'll tell you, Jamie, if you're watching this later on, I'll let you know for sure, and maybe we'll try one of those. But I'll make it a surprise. It'll be a surprise. So I was hoping to do a Brooklyn Beer Week, but we're going to have to wait until next week. And next week we'll be finishing up the live presentation, and it's just a one-shot deal. And after we get into June, we're going to be a little bit more polished, and we're going to change things into working with the two playlists, and a little bit of a slight change to the schedule here with the Old Growler. But I want to thank everybody for being here. For those of you who are watching this later on, would do me a real favor, give me a thumbs up. Subscribe would make me even happier. And if you pass me around to some of your friends and drinking buddies, I would really appreciate that no end. So, from the Old Growler to you, I'm hoping that you're going to have a great day, and looking forward to seeing you next time.